I was 69, argued with my daughter-in-law. My son beat me and threw me on the highway in the rain. It's strange how you can raise someone from their first breath, love them through scraped knees and heartbreaks, and still watch them grow into a stranger right before your eyes. The storm outside wasn't half as loud as the storm. In that kitchen, the rain was slamming against the windows, lightning flashing across the sky. But what hurt more was Tim's voice echoing off the walls. "You always think you know better, Mom." His wife, Rachel, stood behind him with that smug little smirk she always wore when he yelled at me. "She needs to learn her place, Tim," she said like I wasn't even standing right there. It started over something so small it's embarrassing. Leftover chicken. Rachel wanted to toss it. I said I'd save it for soup tomorrow. That's all it took. The air turned thick, the kind of silence before a thunderclap, and then came the shouting. Rachel's eyes narrowed, and Tim's face turned red. He had his father's temper, but none of his kindness. "You can't keep running this house like it's the 80s, he snapped. I remember my hands shaking as I tried to keep my voice calm. "I'm just trying to help Tim. That's all I've ever done." But those words only poured gasoline on the fire. Before I knew it, he was in my face, his voice breaking with rage. "You think you're helping? You're driving us insane?" Rachel folded her arms, egging him on, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. But whatever it was, it lit the fuse. He shoved me hard. My back hit the doorframe, and for a second I couldn't even breathe. I looked at him, waiting for the apology that never came. Instead, he opened the front door, rain pouring in cold wind, howling into the warmth of the house I helped build, and he said, "If you hate it here so much, then leave." My heart stopped. "Tim," I whispered, "you don't mean that, but the man standing in front of me wasn't my son anymore." He grabbed my arm, dragged me outside, and pushed me onto the porch. My slippers hit the wet. Concrete with a slap, my sweater soaked through. Instantly I stumbled, nearly fell, but I caught myself on the railing. "Tim, please." I begged, the rain running down my face, mixing with tears. "It's late and I—" The next sound I heard was the car engine. Rachel's voice cut through the thunder. "Get in the car." She hissed at him like a snake. He hesitated for half a second, just half a second, and then he did. They reversed down the driveway and Rachel rolled down her window. Her face glowed in the headlights, her lipstick too bright, her eyes full of cruelty. "Old hag," she screamed through the rain. "Remember this night, next time you talk back, you'll sleep in the trash every day." And then just like that, they were gone. The sound of their laughter faded into the storm. I stood there shaking, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it over the rain. The driveway glistened. The house windows were dark, and I realized something that broke me, in a way no words ever could. My son had just thrown me out like garbage. You ever feel that kind of pain? That's not just in your chest, but deep down in your bones. That's what it felt like. I started walking. I don't even know why. Maybe because standing there made it too real. My slippers squished with every step, my hair stuck to my face, my old grey sweater clung to my body like a second skin. The rain soaked me through, but my mind was numb. I kept thinking about when Tim was little, how he used to cling to me during thunderstorms. "Don't worry, Mommy," he'd say, "I'll protect you." He was 6 when he said that, and now, decades later, I was out here alone under that same thunder, and he was the one I needed protecting from. I walked down the main road, my breath fogging in the cold, headlights of passing cars, blurring in my tears. No one stopped. Maybe they thought I was just another homeless old woman wandering through the storm. Maybe that's all I looked like. By then my knees hurt, my hip throbbed, and my vision blurred. I don't even know how long I walked. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. Every tea. I thought about turning back. I saw Rachel's face in my mind and heard her voice. "Next time you talk back, you'll sleep in the trash every day." And something inside me said, "No, not this time." I might have been old, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. The rain got heavier. My slippers slipped on the pavement, and I stumbled near the guardrail. My hands scraped the metal, cold and sharp. I wanted to sit down just for a moment, but I was scared I wouldn't get back up. "You're okay," I whispered to myself, though I didn't believe it. My breath came out in white puffs, my teeth chattering. Cars rushed past me, splashing water, not one of them stopping. I laughed bitterly through the tears. 9 years, and this is how it ends, I said aloud to no one. But maybe someone or something was listening, because that night wasn't done with me yet. I remember seeing a faint light in the distance, the kind that looks like hope when you've got none left. Maybe a gas station, maybe a passing truck. I couldn't tell. My vision was hazy, my feet ached, my body was shaking, and I thought about my husband. "Gone 10 years now, John," I whispered. "I don't know what to do." Then thunder cracked overhead, so loud it rattled the ground, and I took it as an answer. Keep moving, so I did, step after step, breath after breath, until my legs could barely hold me. That's when it happened. My foot hit a slick patch, and I fell hard onto the asphalt. Pain shot through my side, my hips screaming. For a second I just lay there, letting the rain hit my face, too tired to move. My vision started to fade, and I remember thinking maybe this is it. Maybe they'll find me tomorrow, and that'll be the end of my story. But no, my story was only beginning, because just when I thought the world had forgotten me, headlights appeared in the distance. Slowing down, someone was stopping. And what happened next? I promise you, changed everything. An hour after they threw me out, I was still walking cold, soaked and trembling like an autumn leaf in the wind. The rain hadn't slowed down one bit. It just kept falling harder, pounding against the pavement, washing away everything except the ache inside me. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, a slick black ribbon under the grey, stormy sky. Cars passed by every few minutes, spraying water in my direction. But not one stopped their headlights, would flash across me for half a second, long enough to remind me I still existed, before they disappeared into the distance. My clothes clung to me like heavy rags, and every step felt like dragging through cement. My hip was throbbing from when I'd stumbled earlier, and my fingers were numb from gripping my soaked sweater. I kept whispering to myself, just a little further, just a little more, though I didn't even know where I was going. My mind wandered in that strange, painful way it does when you're half frozen and alone. I thought of the day Tim was born, how tiny he was, how I promised I'd never let the world hurt him. I thought of his father, John, who used to say, "He's got your eyes, honey, gentle and kind." But that night, all I saw in my son's eyes was anger, the kind that doesn't just burn, it destroys. The thunder cracked above, making me flinch. I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against the metal guardrail. And that's when it happened. My foot slipped on the wet pavement, and before I could stop myself, I fell. My hip hit hard, pain shooting up my side so sharp, it took the breath right out of me. For a moment I just lay there, staring at the rain pouring down from the heavens, thinking maybe this was how my story ended, alone on a dark road, forgotten by the very people I loved most. Then, through the blur of rain and tears, I saw it headlights. At first I panicked, thinking Tim had come back, maybe to yell some more, maybe worse. But as the truck slowed down and stopped a few feet away, I realized it wasn't him. A woman stepped out, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the rain. She wore a yellow raincoat and had a kind, determined face. "Ma'am," she shouted over the storm. "Are you okay?" I tried to swear, but all that came out was a shaky sob. My body hurt, my throat ached, and my words got lost in the wind. She rushed to me, knelt down, and without hesitation wrapped her arms around me. Her embrace was warm, steady, like a lifeline. "You're freezing," she said softly. "Come on, let's get you out of the rain." Her name was Carla. She helped me into her pickup truck, her hands gentle but firm. The seat was soft, the heater blasting warm air that felt like heaven. I remember staring at her through blurry eyes as she handed me a blanket. "You look like you've been through hell," she said with a faint smile. I gave a weak laugh, the kind that hurts more than it heals. "You're not far off, dear," I whispered. My voice cracked, and she didn't press for details. She just nodded like she already understood. Carla drove carefully through the rain, her wipers beating in rhythm with my heart. "We're just a few miles from my place," she said. "You'll be warm soon, I promise." I looked out the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. My mind was a blur of disbelief. How a stranger could stop for me when my own blood didn't. After what felt like forever, we turned on to a gravel driveway, that LED to a cozy farmhouse, with a warm yellow light glowing in the window. The kind of house that looked like it had stories, laughter, and Sunday dinners in it. When we stepped inside, I was hit by the smell of soup and freshly baked bread. A golden retriever bounded up, tail wagging, licking my hand like he'd known me forever. "That's Buddy," Carla said, chuckling softly. "He thinks everyone who walks in deserves love." I smiled for the first time that night. She called out Hank, "Grab a towel and some dry clothes." A moment later, a tall man with kind eyes came down the hall. "Good Lord," he said, taking in the sight of me. "You poor thing. They didn't ask who I was or what I'd done. They just helped." Hank handed me a soft flannel shirt and sweatpants, while Carla LED'd me to the bathroom. "Warm up, sweetheart," she said gently. "We'll fix you some tea." When I stepped out clean and dry, I felt almost human again. Carla had laid out a bowl of hot vegetable soup on the kitchen table, and Buddy was curled up at my feet. The warmth, the light, the quiet hum of the storm outside, it all felt like a dream. Carla sat across from me, her hands wrapped around her mug. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said, "but if you want to talk, I'll listen." I hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "My son threw me out tonight." She blinked, her eyes softening. "Your son did that?" I nodded. "And his wife," they said. I talk too much that I'm in the way. I felt tears forming again, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from release. Carla reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "Well, you're not in the way here." Something broke open in me then, a flood of relief I hadn't felt in years. "You already did more for me in 1 hour." I whispered than my own son did in years. Carla's eyes glistened. "Sometimes," she said, "family isn't who you're born with. It's who stops for you in the rain." That line hit me deep. We sat there in silence after that, the kind that doesn't need filling. When I finally went to bed, the sheets were warm, and Buddy lay at my feet. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe but miles away. The storm hadn't just soaked the roads, it had soaked into the hearts of the people who left me. There, back in that house, Rachel was pacing, her perfect hair now a tangled mess. "Tim," she said, "what if someone saw? What if something happened to her?" Tim was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, silent. She grabbed his arm. "We can't just ignore this." He stood up, his face pale. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll go back. We'll check." Rachel hesitated, fear creeping into her voice. "What if she's gone?" Tim didn't answer. He just grabbed his keys and walked out into the rain as their car disappeared down the same highway. I slept soundly under a quilted blanket, unaware that fate was already setting the next scene. The storm that had thrown me into darkness was about to shine it. It's cruel light on them, because when they came looking for me, they wouldn't find what they expected. The rain had washed more than just the dirt that night. It was about to wash away their lies too. By the time Tim and Rachel pulled out of their driveway, the rain had slowed. But the guilt in that car was thick enough to choke on. The windshield wipers squeaked with every pass, and neither of them said a word for a long stretch. The headlights sliced through the mist, lighting up the empty, wet highway where they'd left me. Rachel's hands were trembling on her lap, her voice barely a whisper when she said, "Tim, what if someone saw us?" He didn't answer. His jaw was locked tight, his eyes fixed straight ahead. You think she's still there? She pressed her voice, cracking. Maybe she went home, he muttered, though he knew how ridiculous that sounded. Home, the same place he'd thrown me out of when they reached the spot, the one Rachel remembered, by a crooked road sign and a dented guardrail. Tim slowed the car. The rain drizzled softly now, puddles glittering under the headlights. He parked on the shoulder and stepped out, his shoes splashing in the mud. Rachel followed behind, holding her coat over her head. The only sound was the rain, tapping against the hood of the car. The spot where they'd left me was empty. No one was there, just puddles, raindrops, and the faint smell of wet asphalt. Then Rachel saw it, half buried in the mud near the guardrail. My slipper, the same old one, with the faded pink flower stitched on top. She covered her mouth with a gasp. Tim. Where is she? Her voice was trembling, and for the first time that night, he felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. He picked up the slipper, his hand shaking. Maybe someone picked her up. Rachel turned in a slow circle, scanning the darkness. Or maybe, oh my God, what if She couldn't even finish the sentence. The thought of finding me lifeless on the roadside made her knees weak. Tim started walking along the shoulder, shouting into the darkness, "Mom M." Mom! But the wind only threw his voice back at him. Rachel joined in, her voice cracking. Please just answer us nothing, just the endless hiss of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Then they noticed something, flashing lights up ahead, blue and red, cutting through the night, police cars and ambulance. For a moment Rachel froze. "Tim," she whispered, clutching his sleeve. "Do you see that?" His stomach dropped. "Oh, God," he muttered. "Oh, no, no, no." He sprinted back to the car and started driving toward the lights, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. The closer they got, the more terrified they became. In his mind, Tim saw every possible outcome, each worse than the last. What if she'd been hit by a car? What if someone hurt her? What if she was gone and it was his fault? When they pulled up, they saw 2 police cruisers parked on the shoulder, their lights reflecting off the wet road, and an ambulance with its back doors open. Rachel could barely breathe. Tim slammed the car into park and jumped out before it even stopped rolling. "Officer!" he shouted. "What happened here?" A tall officer in a rain jacket turned toward him, his expression unreadable. Rachel stumbled out behind Tim, clutching her purse like a shield. "We were looking for an elderly woman," she said quickly, her voice shaking. She was walking along this road. Have you seen her?" The officer tilted his head slightly. "You must be the son," he said. The way he said it, calm, steady knowing, made both of them freeze. Rachel blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" The officer stepped aside and their eyes followed his gesture. There I was sitting in the back of the ambulance, wrapped in a thick blanket, my wet hair combed back a steaming cup. Of tea in my hands, beside me stood Carla, her arm around my shoulder, talking to another officer. When I saw them, I didn't say a word. I just looked at them, the kind of look that speaks 1,000 words without saying one. "Tim's mouth fell open, Mom," he whispered. His voice sounded small, almost childlike. Rachel's face, went pale. "Oh my God," she muttered. The officer took a slow step toward them. "We've already spoken to Mrs. Harris. He said she's safe now and she's told us everything." Tim tried to backtrack immediately. "Wait, no, this isn't what it looks like. Save it." The cop interrupted sharply. "You left a 69-year-old woman on a highway in a storm. That's not an accident. That's a crime." Rachel began crying, shaking her head. "It was just an argument. She wanted to leave. We didn't mean to enough," the officer said firmly. He nodded to another cop who stepped forward and took out a pair of handcuffs. "You're both coming with us." The moment those words hit the air, time seemed to stop. The only sound was the rain hitting the pavement. Tim looked at me, panic in his eyes. "Mom, please," he begged. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I didn't move, I didn't speak for years. I had swallowed my words to keep peace in that house, but not tonight. Silence was my voice. The officer read them their rights, his voice low but firm. Rachel sobbed openly now, mascara running down her face. "Please," she said, "we were just angry." "That's no excuse for cruelty," Carla said sharply from beside me. They both turned toward her, startled. She stood there in her raincoat, unflinching. If I hadn't found her, she could have died out there. "You should be ashamed," Tim hung his head. For the first time I saw him not as the boy I raised, but as the man he'd become, broken, selfish, lost. The officers LED them toward their car, handcuffs glinting under the streetlights. As they passed the ambulance, I caught Rachel's eyes. There was fear there, but not the kind that comes from punishment. It was the kind that comes from realizing you've lost something you can never get back. As I watched them go, I didn't feel anger, not even revenge. What I felt was peace, a deep, quiet peace that started in my chest and spread through every part of me. I wasn't the helpless old woman they'd left in the rain anymore. I was free. Carla placed a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Aye, sometimes God doesn't give you storms to drown you. He gives them to wash people out of your life." I turned to her, smiling through tears. Then maybe I said, this storm was the best thing that ever happened to me. The ambulance doors closed, and as we drove away, I looked out the back window. Tim and Rachel stood there, under the flashing lights, small and helpless against the vast, empty highway. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel sorry for them. I just whispered a quiet goodbye and turned away. The rain was finally stopping, and somewhere beyond those clouds, the sun was waiting to rise. Weeks turned into months, and the storm that had once felt like the end of my world began to look more like its beginning. Carla and her husband Hank opened their home to me, and little by little, I learned what peace sounded like again. Their farmhouse sat at the edge of town, where mornings smelled like fresh bread, and the evenings came, wrapped in the soft hum of crickets. I'd wake up to the sound of Hank whistling in the kitchen, Carla humming as she watered her plants, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake with a knot of fear in my stomach. The walls were covered with pictures of family, real family, the kind that smiles with their whole heart. I helped with little things, setting the table, folding laundry, feeding their chickens out back. It wasn't about doing much. It was about belonging somewhere again. One morning, Hank looked at me over his coffee and said, "You know, Mrs. Harris, you've brought more life into this house than we ever expected." I laughed and told him, "Well, I guess the storm washed me right to your door, for a reason my son tried to call once from jail." The phone rang and rang his name flashing on the screen. For a long moment I stared at it, my hand trembling slightly. Then I let it ring out. Some wounds can't be fixed with words. Some silences are the only way to heal. I didn't hate him. I just couldn't go back to the place where love had to hurt first, to feel real. Instead, I found new purpose. Carla drove me to a local shelter that helped elderly women who'd been mistreated by family or abandoned with nowhere to go. The first day I walked in, the room fell quiet. Dozens of women looked up at me, faces lined with pain but eyes still searching for hope. I sat down among them, no longer ashamed, no longer small. We shared stories, traded laughter, shed tears, and somewhere in between I realized something powerful. Survival looks different on everyone, but strength feels the same. "You're stronger than you think," I told them one afternoon. "Don't wait for someone to rescue you. Sometimes the rescue is you, choosing yourself." Life has a funny way of circling back, doesn't it? The same storm that nearly broke me ended up washing my world clean. I planted flowers outside Carla's porch, bright marigolds my favorite, and every morning I'd sit there with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky gold. If Rachel ever drives past this farmhouse again, maybe she'll see me there on that swing smiling, not out of spite but peace, because sometimes the family you lose isn't really a loss at all. It's just space being made for the one you were meant to find. They thought they were done with me, that cruelty could end a mother's worth. But life has a way of turning storms into mirrors, and that night, they saw who they truly were. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value every story and every voice. Don't forget to subscribe to Tears and Strength and share this video with your friends.